Hello, my most amazing artists. Today is a super exciting day because we get to use clay. This clay is real clay that comes from the earth. It comes from underground. It's called earthenware clay. This type of clay needs a special oven to bake it, and we're so lucky to have one of those. That oven is called a kiln. It gets to 2,000 degrees to bake this clay so that we can keep it forever and ever. So whatever we make today, we get to keep. That's awesome. So today, the first thing you're going to do is write your name and your class code on your clay mat. This clay is pretty messy, so we want to keep it on that clay mat. You're going to have something called a clay slab. It's about as thick as a cookie. We want it to stay that way so that we're going to make sure that we keep it just like that and try not to play with it or smush it into a ball. Keep it as a nice clay slab. Then we get to add some texture to our clay slab. That means that we get to add something that makes it a little bit more detailed and bumpy. So we have some different types of fabric or materials that will make different prints onto your clay. So there's different things like some kind of material called burlap, then this one's lace, then the other one is just kind of a normal fabric like a piece of rug or something. There's different types of fabrics that'll be on your table. Whatever you do, just make sure you stick it on there real well. After you stick it, you gotta flip it, so stick it. Go ahead, stick it down, Miss Q. Then I'm going to flip it over and I'm going to press. I'm going to put all my weight onto there. I'm going to press really hard and then take it off and I'll see that print on there. Don't worry about filling the whole thing. I want you to just make sure you have that one square of print on there and that you can really see it pretty well. If it's not exactly how you thought it was, that's okay. We're going to have more opportunities to add more different textures to look like it has some feeling or some more detail or some design on there. Now the next thing we're going to do is pick a cookie cutter. We are not making cookies because you cannot eat this clay, yuck. But we are going to be pressing them in to make a shape. So you guys will get to pick from a few different cookie cutters. You will press in and then pull it out. So all that extra clay, we're going to make sure that we use that. So we're going to put it off to the side because we're going to be talking about what we're doing next. But first, I think I'm going to get my clay tools out because I'm going to need a few of these. I might decide that I want to scratch in some more texture or maybe use this lid to make some circles on there. If I'm pressing texture into my clay, I'm making sure I'm pressing super lightly, not too hard. If I press too hard, I'm going to push all the way through the clay, and like I said, that will make it thinner than a cookie. We do not want it any thinner than a cookie because that means it might break, especially when it gets baked in the oven. We don't want that to happen, so make sure you keep it just as thick as a cookie. Next thing I'm going to do is take a piece of clay and roll something called a clay coil. A clay coil is a long and skinny piece of clay made by rolling out with your hands. You can either do it on the table with one hand, with two hands, or you can do it in the air with your hands. Whatever way you decide to roll your coil, make sure it's about as thick as your pinky. Always do the pinky test to see if it's thick as your pinky. If it's thicker than your pinky, it's probably too thick, and if it's thinner than your pinky, it might break. So look at your pinky finger and check. Now, a coil is a long and skinny piece of clay rolled. So that might be like a clay worm or a clay snake. I'm sure many of you have made worms and snakes out of Play-Doh before. So it's basically the same thing. Clay is just a little bit harder to work with. So you might have to do it extra like I'm doing it in the video. It took me a long time to get that coil all sorted out. Next thing I'm going to do is pinch off a piece and I'm going to shape it into the first letter of my first name. Well, you guys call me Miss Q though, so I think I'm going to make the letter Q. But you guys would want to make the first letter of your first name. So if your name starts with an A, you're going to try to make the letter A out of coils. If it starts with a B, make the letter B. So first thing I'm going to do to make my letter Q is I've shaped my coil into a circle. Then I'm going to pinch off my next piece that I need, a little tiny tail for that capital letter Q. I'm going to go ahead and smoosh and smooth it onto there. I'm going to make sure that you smush down any little pieces that you want on there, because if you just lay it right on top, it's going to fall right off. It might seem to stick now, but once it goes in that clay oven, or even when it just dries out, it might fall right off, and then your name is going to change. My Q might turn to an O. Nobody calls me Miss O, it's Miss Q. So make sure that you get all your pieces of your letters on there. So I went ahead and put it on top of my star or whatever type of name little circle you have, and I realized it might not quite be what I wanted it to, so maybe I'm going to go ahead and make another letter. Of course, you do have to make your letter, but you can practice it as much as you want. We do have to finish today, though, so these have enough time to dry before the art show. I'm going to go ahead and make sure I really smush any little pieces on that I'm using and smooth it out. If it breaks, that's okay. Just smooth it out again. That's the nice part about clay, is there's no way to make mistakes because you can always fix them. After you roll the letter of your name and create it out of a clay coil, then you're going to want to attach it to your shape that you made with that texture. But the thing is, you want to make sure it fits on there really well. The other thing is, if you were to just stick it on top of there, it's not going to stick like it might when you play with Play-Doh. It's going to fall right off, especially when it dries out and it gets ready to go in that clay oven or kiln. So we have to do a special something called scratch and attach, or use a toothbrush to make it stick. Just like if you don't brush your teeth every morning and every night, they're going to eventually fall out. So if you don't brush your clay, it's going to fall right off. So you have to brush your clay using a special clay glue. That clay glue is just some clay and water mixed together. It's called slip, probably because it's pretty slippery. So that's called a clay glue that we use to scratch, 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 and attach. Once you scratch with your toothbrush and attach, you're going to smush and smooth. I'm going to smush that letter on, but be careful that I don't ruin it. It's still that letter. And I'm going to carefully smooth it onto there, smoothing out any cracks or any bumps in my clay. Once I scratch, attach, smush, and smooth, then I'm good to go. But I want to make sure I do something called the wiggle test. If I wiggle my letter, if I wiggle it, or if I pick up my whole shape and anything falls off, I didn't pass the wiggle test. So make sure that when you wiggle it around or pick it up, everything stays put. If it starts to fall off now, it's definitely going to fall off once it dries. Everything has to dry before it gets put in that clay oven. So make sure that you really make sure that it's attached today, so I don't have to worry about anything falling off before it goes in the oven. After you put your finishing touches on your clay piece with your name on it, or your clay coil letter, then when you're done, you're going to make sure you do that wiggle test. Don't forget. Make sure that your name is on your clay mat, and also gather up any extra clay. We make sure that no extra clay goes home in our pockets because we don't have that special oven to bake it. It will just crumble up and turn to dirt, and nobody will be happy about dirt in your pockets. Also, it's important because clay is expensive. It's something we're lucky to use in art class, and another student could use that clay. I make sure I collect everything, including your clay tools. Make sure all your tools get back in the bin. When you're finished, make sure your finished clay piece gets put on your mat. Don't pick it up without your mat, and hold it with both hands like zombie arms, like we always talk about. When you're done, clean your area with your sponge. Don't get it any more wet than it needs to be. It's already wet enough. We don't want to get soaking wet or we're going to make mud. Forget to put your extra clay in my clay bag. Bring your piece up to me on your mat, and I can't wait to see your awesome artworks. Next week, after these dry and go in the kiln, we'll get to paint them. Wow, I can't wait to see what we create. All right, artists, have fun today.